Well, hello everybody. It's so nice to see you all here. And I would like to start with a question. What shaped the way you think about cowboys? If it's pop culture, for example, Western movies, then you probably might be wrong in the way you see true American cowboys. And our guest today is a perfect person, if I may say so, to introduce you to what being a cowboy really looks like. Our guest today is Tanner Ripley with his family. So maybe I could ask for a round of applause for them. We have Tanner, his wife Brooke, and his 4 children, Harmony, Meg, Tim, and littlest of littlest, Izzy. So they are all here. Without any further ado, just a few words about Tanner. Tanner grew up in a saddle on a ranch in Montana. Could you get any closer to being a cowboy than this? I don't think so. So Tanner grew up on the ranch, but then he transformed. He graduated Montana University. He also graduated Master's Seminar, so he's a pastor as well. And he's with his family in Poland for how long? A year now. So they made significant improvements in their Polish. So I think after the lecture you can easily approach them and try to speak Polish. So I won't take any more time. Tanner, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and we invite you here as American Corner and Center of American Studies, Lublin. So the floor is yours.
Dzień dobry. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Weronika. Dziękuję. Dziękuję za gościnę. Dziękuję za zaproszenie. Moja rodzina i ja przeprowadziliśmy się tutaj w Polsce prawie rok temu. Prawie dokładnie rok temu. We moved to Poland almost exactly a year ago, and we're happy to be here this morning, aren't we, children? You're going to get to know my family more in a little bit, and more about myself in a little bit. I understand that some of you are here and don't have an exam as a result. Is this correct? You glad to be here? Hey, I'm happy that you're here. Whatever brought you here this morning, or whatever motivated you to be here, I'm happy you're here. We're glad to be in Poland. We enjoy Poland. You'll notice that I'm not necessarily dressed as a cowboy this morning. Did you notice that? I mean, maybe a little bit. But I left all my cowboy clothing in Montana because I never imagined that I'd need it in Poland. This is a huge privilege for me. Veronika's right, I did grow up on the back of a saddle. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I never imagined that I'd get to talk about something that was so near and dear to my heart at a venue like this. So it's a huge privilege. I mean that sincerely. I want to thank the Center for American Studies, American Corner. Raise your hand if you were here during a Thanksgiving lecture that I gave last November. Okay. You, young lady, and Desi, yeah. So, yeah, man, good. Okay, were any of you here for the Christmas time lecture that I gave? Okay, I got one. So for most of you, this is pierwszy raz. First time, okay. Well, I'll take a little bit more time and give some background then. Thank you, Pavel. My lecture this morning, by the way, you could serve me this morning by doing 2 things. If I use a word that you don't understand, please tell me. Just slip your hand up. I'm happy to give a synonym or explain it a little bit better. It would be będę szkoda, jeśli nie rozumiecie. If you didn't understand anything, it'd be a huge shame. Okay, so please slip your hand up. Second, this lecture is meant to be interactive. So I have some built-in question times with you. But I want you to use those. If you don't use those, I will use them by calling on you. Okay, so you can either volunteer or I'll volunteer you. Okay, that's how it works. I'll either call on you or you can offer yourself. All right? I'm going to do this in 3 parts this morning. The first, I'm going to give you an introduction about a cowboy. Now, you know the word cowboy doesn't have a hyphen in it like that, but I was a boy once, and I grew up as a cowboy. So I'm going to give you a little introduction to my life. Secondly, part 2 is going to be, how about them cowboys? Now, understand we're in an academic setting this morning, and so part 2, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the history and the culture of the American cowboy. Part 3 is going to be the story of a cowboy. Not definite article the, but a cowboy. That cowboy happens to be a man that I know quite well. I'll introduce you to him later, okay? So part 1, short introduction on myself and my family. And then part 2, how about them cowboys? This is a picture of some cowboys that I know. I'll explain to you later. All the pictures in this presentation will be ones that either I took or were taken of us. So I'm not borrowing things or pulling off the internet. I want you to know that. Part 3, story of a cowboy. Okay, let's start with point 1. Part 1, this is a cowboy. This is myself, probably age 4 in the living room. My dad says that I was on the back of a horse before I could walk. There was a time where I was riding on the horse with my dad, and a lady pulled up alongside on the road in her car and asked my dad, "What are you doing to your son?" She suggested that by taking him with me on the horse, I was probably Izzy's age. Izzy, can you raise your hand? You wave at Daddy? It's probably Izzy's age, and I was riding on the horse, and this lady suggested that that was child abuse. My dad replied to her, "If you could see how he is when I leave him at home without me, you'd think differently." What he meant by that was, I love to be around horses, and I love to be with my dad. So I love being a cowboy from the earliest age. I have up there credentials. I did not study the American West at university. I did go to university and I studied animal science in preparation to be a cowboy, to be a rancher, but I don't have this expansive background in, American cowboy history. My credentials are much more anecdotal. They're much more experiential, if you will, okay? I spent a lot of time around cowboys. I grew up in a very rural place, so my friends were not my peers. I grew up about an hour from the closest grocery store, and I grew up 30 minutes by gravel road to a small rural school. There wasn't a lot of kids my age around, you understand? So my friends were my dad's friends, who were cowboys in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. That seemed normal to me because that's all I knew at that time. So here you'll see on the far left, that's myself. Is that a horse? What is that? That's a mule. That's a mule. That's a cross between a donkey and a horse. I learned to ride not on a horse, but initially on a mule. Her name was Alice. She was stubborn as all get out. Oh, she was stubborn. She'd take me, if we were riding along the trail like this, along a cattle trail, and there was a branch on a tree that was just the right height. You know what she'd do? No matter how hard I pulled on her reins, she'd steer off, and she'd go right under that low-lying branch, and she'd duck her head down. She'd scrape me right off on that branch onto the ground. Dad said that she taught me every dirty trick in the book. She taught me a lot about riding, but I can't say that I was sorry to graduate to a real horse after Alice. Here's my dad, and here's one of our hired hands who is my friend. Here's myself, I don't know, age 1 or something. Here's myself a couple years ago. So what happened between here and here? Well, I grew up like you, went to school, and then I headed, like you, off to university. And I had a choice to make about a career option at that point. I was the only son. The expectation was, for my dad and for my community, that I would go back to the ranch. That just made sense. So I started studying at university agriculture business. That led to a lot of economics, which I enjoyed, but I wanted to be more around animals. So then I switched over to animal science, which is something of sort of a pre-veterinary route. I spent a lot of time studying nutrition and reproduction, and I did an internship in cattle embryonics, where I traveled the tri-state area in helping plant embryos, cattle embryos, into fertile cows with a veterinary technician. I enjoyed those things: reproduction, diseases, nutrition, and that's what my life was about, mostly. I wore cowboy boots around my local university, and that's more or less how I was known. I'm sitting on a horse here, as you can see, whose name is Elmer. This is Elmer. He's a good horse. He wasn't the best horse I ever had, but he was a hard-working horse. He was only about 4 years old in this picture. You can see he's pretty sweated up, isn't he? It's a hot day, and we put a lot of work on these horses a few times a year. Elmer was still learning at that point. He's a little bit what we call cowy. What does it mean for a horse to be cowy? That's sort of the innate sense of how well tuned in they are to the thoughts and movements of a cow. So these horses are bred, we grew up on quarter horses, and these horses are bred to know how to move a cow. In fact, the best cattle horses that my dad trained knew what to do before you would tell them. They're really incredible creatures. I remember one time when I was about Meg's age. Meg's Margaret is 9 years old, and we'd brought cows up to the mountains, and we're sitting on this cool grass in the spring. The grass was called Timothy, which is the name of my son. And we were laying there, and Dad says, "Hey, why don't you go hop on Rusty?" Rusty was one of Dad's favorite horses. I'd never gotten to ride Rusty because I was a pretty young boy. And Rusty was a big horse. He was well trained. But I did. Dad boosted me up on Rusty, and I got on him. And he said, "Why don't you just keep these ladies," that's what he'd call these bunch of cows, "why don't you keep these gals kind of huddled up here for a little bit?" Sorry if that's what offends you, but that's what Dad called them. That's what cowboys often say when they're pushing cows. When we're pushing cows up the road, he said, "Come on, ladies, let's go." And so he said, "Gather them up." And I got on Rusty, and you know what he did? He did everything for me. It's incredible. I sat on him, and he read the mind of those cattle. And so just when I was about to turn him, he was already doing it. It was like he had an innate sense there. You understand? These are incredible animals. They're not stupid. They're not dumb. They're actually bred to do these kind of things. Their instincts are incredible. Here's a picture of the ranch that I grew up on. You can see some hay there in the background. There's the bunkhouse, and there's a few of our cows. I forgot to convert this to hectaacres. I think it's roughly 1,800. I grew up on a ranch of about 4,000 acres. We leased another 1,000 acres, so roughly 1,800 hectaacres. We had about 400 head of cattle, of mother cows that we had, about another 100 yearlings, and about 25 bulls. So in all, somewhere between 450 and 525 cows. We had about 15 head of horses, or 10 head of horses. That fluctuated here and there. Sometimes we had up to 100 chickens, 3 or 4 pigs. We had a massive garden. So we grew up pretty rural. Here's just a shot of me riding a horse. Now, it wasn't just myself that grew up on a horse, though I grew up in a real cowboy climate, but it just so happens that my wife also liked horses. This is my wife, the little one on the front of a saddle. She grew up also in Montana, more on a wheat ranch, more in a farming, a Rolnik atmosphere, but she loved horses also. It so happened that we met at Montana State University, not Montana University, University of Montana, but the Montana State University. That's a big difference in Montana, you see, because we only have 2 universities. And either you're a cat or you're not. You're for the other team. I grew up always wanting to go to Montana State University. That's where my parents went. I went there, eventually got a college football scholarship. I'd be number 59 there on the field. My wife and I met at a wonderful local church in Bozeman. She worked in advertising for the sports department. I happened to play football. We were around each other a little bit. And eventually, we even got engaged on a horse. It's Christmas morning, 2012. And I took her up. We read Proverbs 31. That's the last chapter in a book called Proverbs in the Bible. And I got down on one knee and took a diamond ring out of my pocket and said, "Brooke, will you marry me?" And she cried and said yes. And we rode back down the mountain and came around the corner, and my whole family was there holding these signs. It's a wonderful day. Here's our engagement picture. I know we look like kids there. We grew in love for each other and eventually in love for our children. Teraz mam czworo dzieci. We'll meet more of them in just a second. Here's a picture from about 2 years ago. We didn't live at the ranch ever as a married couple, but we lived close to the ranch and we went out there often. That included catching fish in our little stream, and when kids grow up around that, they naturally acclimate to that and enjoy the things that you enjoy. So that hat that Megs is wearing there was my grandpa's cowboy hat. They spent quite a little time on a horse as well, up in the mountains or down at the ranch. I'd like you to meet my children. Is that okay? I'm going to ask them to come up one at a time and just introduce themselves. Harmony, would you come up? Here's a couple pictures of Harmony. Go ahead and grab the mic there.
Dzień dobry, nazywam się Harmony Ripley. Good morning, my name is Harmony Ripley.
Harmony, what do you really appreciate about coming from a cowboy background? What did you love about the ranch?
I loved waking up early in the morning to drive out to the ranch and do branding.
Good. Thank you, Harmony. Good job, sweetie. Moja najstarsza, she remembers getting up very early in the morning when it was still dark, and we'd have oatmeal and we'd hop in the pickup and go out to the ranch real early in the morning and brand cattle. Okay, next is Margaret, or we call her Meg for short. You would call her maybe Gosia.
Dzień dobry, nazywam się Małgorzata. Good morning, my name is Margaret.
Megs, what did you love about growing up around cowboys and ranch life?
I loved riding on the back of a horse and being able to control it.
Amen. Thanks. Okay. Here's another picture of Meg, not just with a horse, but with a chicken as well. All right, a couple more of Meg. And who's that? Come on up here, Timothy. Here's Timothy sitting on Elmer after Elmer had been through a hard day.
My name is Timothy. Dzień dobry.
Glad you're here, Timothy. Thank you. Timothy liked to sit on You understand, some of these horses were safe to sit on for the children, like this one. Who's this? That's not Sonny, that's Tomcat. That's kind of a funny name for a horse, but his name was Tomcat. He was a big, gentle one. Some of them were not as safe for the children to sit on until they'd been ridden hard and gone through a long day of work. And then they were tired and all they wanted to do was eat. So Timothy's sitting on one in that case. Okay. I'm not going to ask Izzy to come up here, but Izzy, would you raise your hand again? Thank you. This is moja najmłodsza córka, and you can see her in the pink coat there. Dzień dobry. Thanks, Izzy, for being brave. Okay, these are just some pictures at the ranch. You know, we didn't use the horses every day on the ranch. You understand that technology, including things like four-wheelers, we call them side-by-sides, have changed ranching life some. We still used horses, but we didn't ride them every day. But there was about a week where we rode a horse every day straight in order to gather all of our cows, about 400 of them up, bring them back to the ranch, sort them, and then bring some of them up to a public grazing place in the forest. And this was a long, hard week in which you woke up around 4 or 5 often in the morning, drove out to the ranch. For us, at least, we drove about an hour to get there. My family still lives there and operates the ranch, my oldest sister and her husband. And then you'd ride hard all morning and sometimes into the afternoon. And what you see in this picture on the left there shows kind of the culmination of that hard work. You understand, these cows and these horses worked hard all week, and then we'd bring them up to these beautiful settings in the mountain where they could graze to their heart's content. They could eat grass all day, and they lived a good life, these cows did. They'd rest and eat up there all summer long. Here's us bringing them down a hill just above the house. This is a view from our front porch in Montana, the house that we left about a year ago to come here. That's just the sunset one morning. And here's a picture I took of the ranch. You know the question I get a lot in Poland? Dlaczego? You might be thinking that yourself. Why leave this to come to Poland? Well, I think the first thing is that Poles underestimate their country a little bit. Polska jest piękna kraj. It's a beautiful country. We've been to the Tatra Mountains. We've been up to Gdańsk. We think that your country is beautiful. It has a beauty of its own. But wherever we travel in the world, wherever we talk to, people tend to know Montana. And now even more so because of a series called Yellowstone. Any of you seen the television series Yellowstone? Okay, I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But it's a decent question. It's an understandable question. Because to leave this, to come to Poland without really any direct traceable Polish ancestry, though my wife and I both have roots in Central Europe that we are able to trace. I'll talk about those more in a little bit. Why? Why Poland? Why here? And the answer is quite simple, but it might surprise you. It's because I love Jesus. And when I grew up at the ranch, I grew up sort of around an understanding of Christianity, but I didn't understand it clearly and fully until I was just about your age. And I had a decision to make then because I was being asked to teach in different places, and I was gravitating more towards the love of Christ and his church. I had a choice to make between this cowboy lifestyle that I'd known and loved and even studied at university. I was graduating in animal science, of all things. So I was supposed to take these skills and go back to the ranch and be a cowboy. That makes sense, doesn't it? That's what my dad had worked for 40 years to prepare. It's what my town and community had expected. It makes perfect sense on paper. So why not? Well, that's a longer story, but let me just give you something to consider if I can. Why leave the ranch? Why leave Montana? In Mark 10, Jesus says something that amazes the disciples. That's why it says, and the disciples were amazed at his words about the cost of following Jesus, the difficulty of true biblical Christianity. But Jesus said to them again, children, how difficult is it to enter the kingdom of God? It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. We might say with a little bit of care, it's easier for a horse to go through a key. Just by way of illustration, the point is it's impossible then for a rich person, that's who Jesus had just been talking to enter the kingdom of God. And they were exceedingly astonished and said to him, who then can be saved? Jesus looked at them and said, with man it is impossible. Jesus is saying, man can't save himself by his own life, by his works, by his deeds. Man-made religion can never save, but Jesus says all things are possible with God. And Peter, that's one of his disciples, began to say to him, see, we've left everything and followed you. And that was true. Peter was a fisherman. Some of the disciples were tax collectors. Some of them left good jobs to follow Jesus. Jesus said, truly I say to you, there's no one who's left house or brothers or sisters or mothers or father or children or lands. And the Greek word there deals with agriculture. Some versions translate this farms, or it might even say ranches. Whoever has left ranches for my sake and for the gospel's sake will not receive 100-fold, who will not receive 100-fold now in this time, houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecution. So bardzo ciekawe how Jesus responds here. It's very interesting, isn't it? He says, it's going to be difficult, but oh, it'll be good. It's going to be difficult because you'll face scorn for following Jesus, but you'll also be granted things like new spiritual family, brothers and sisters in the church in the age to come. Many who are first will be last and last first. So I just remember reading this about your age and being compelled that This life is short, and I'll live it in a way that counts and that is meaningful, not just for this life, but for eternity. So, admittedly, leaving the ranch and leaving my inheritance, because this ranch will not be left to me anymore. I have no rights, no inheritance to this place. So I had to make a decision between millions of dollars in assets and the job that I've chosen, being a pastor. But I've never looked back and thought about it twice. Why am I here in Poland? A church invited me, Kościół Chrześcijański Pojednania. It's located in Grodzisk Mazowiecki near Warsaw. So I pastor, I help serve in and lead and teach in a Protestant church near there. Okay, so that's a little bit of introduction on me, ranching, cowboying. I wanted to address that question of why, the passage that makes sense to you. That's part one. Let me pause for questions. Okay, anything you saw that provoked you to curiosity? What's going through your mind? What do you think? Yes, please. Hi again. Nice to see you. Remind me your name again. I'm sorry.
Lydia?
Lydia?
Lydia, yeah.
Yes.
Hi, it's
Lydia.
good to see you again. I do have a question about your siblings, because you said you're like the only child or like the only boy child?
The only boy.
Okay, so how about the ranch and like the, I don't know, any brothers-in-law who inherited that or like,
right.
this is just like
Yeah,
a
good
silly
question.
question maybe, but yeah.
No, I have two older sisters. We have wonderful relationships. Both of them are married. One of my oldest lives at the ranch with her husband and two sons and manages the ranch. And my other older sister lives nearby with her husband on a farm. So they don't work as much with cattle, but they do work with crops. And that's why we're still able to go there and visit there. It's still in the family. Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Please.
How about your dad's, feedback or reaction?
Oh, yeah. Good question.
I think like everybody's wondering, what was your dad's response to your choice of the path, right? That you're following. Thanks.
Yeah, it's an important question and a good one. Can you imagine my dad? We're going to learn more about him in a little bit, but he worked for 40 years at the ranch. When he moved to the ranch in 1976, the ranch was very in debt to the bank. And Dad worked and slaved and labored 7 days a week for 40 years. He had one son who he hoped would inherit the ranch. That's a difficult thing to swallow. And it was for Dad, but about the same time that I began to grow in my faith, my dad did also. We were baptized together about 15, 20 years ago. And so that choice for me to become a pastor then became easier for him to understand because his affections and his desires were changing at that same time. Of course he was disappointed. Of course that was difficult. But I'm happy to say that my dad and I's relationship has never been better than it is today. I love my dad. And I think it's fair to say that I have no bigger sort of cheerleader in life than my mom and dad. They're in full support of me coming here. Obviously, it's difficult for them, but they love this choice. They love our children. It was not just hard for Dad when I said I'd like to pastor a church rather than ranch, but then you can imagine about 15 years later when we said, Dad, we want to go to Poland. Oh, it was an incredible heartbreak for him. Incredible. And he looked at me and said, not surprised. Go ahead. Just leave my grandkids here. So he loves his 4 grandkids, and they have a special relationship. It's hard for him to have Brooke and I go because he has a wonderful relationship with my wife, but it's harder, I think, for him for these 4 kiddos. And I can see the tears welling up in their eyes too. It's hard. It's hard, but it's good. Thanks for your question. Very insightful. Other questions? Please, sir.
Hi, my name is Kamil. I wanted to ask about this religious community in Grodzisk Mazowiecki. How big is it? And feel free to add other things about it if you want to.
Sure. Thank you for your curiosity. Thank you for the question. Our church, Nasz Kościół, started as a small gathering of Bible-believing Christians in a church, in a home where it met for about 10 years. And I think about 8 years ago, it began to meet in a public place that we rented. And the church began to grow somewhat rapidly, especially over the last 2 years. So every Sunday morning we meet. Obviously, we gather to do what the New Testament church did, which is pray, preach, sing, give, fellowship, and practice the ordinances, what we call the Lord's Supper, the bread and the wine, and baptism. And there's about 100 of us who gather. 3/4 of those are Polish people, and about 1/4 of those, maybe 20, 25, sometimes 30, are internationals. So it's a Polish-speaking church. We wear headsets whereby we received simultaneous translation. Uczy się polskiego codziennie, ale mówi tylko trochę jeszcze. So our goal these first 2 years is to study Polish hard and to study it every day. We will return tonight to Grodzisk to some language lessons. And our goal there is to be more useful to this church in the future and to be more of a help to the wonderful pastors who are already there. There's 4 pastors there currently. I believe the New Testament teaches a plurality or multiple pastors, and what we do is very simple. We just gather and teach the word. That's our authority. So thank you for your question. I'm not exaggerating when I say it is a beautiful, wonderful community. This first year in Poland has been difficult in some ways, but not really because of these people. They've just welcomed us in and they're our family. I preached 2 weeks ago on Psalm 113 and I said, look around, you're our family. Because our biological families, thousands of, and it's just, these are our people. So regardless of background, regardless of language, regardless of economic status, we gather and love and care for one another. You may know, I'll wrap it up with this, that Protestant or evangelical Christianity represents about between 0.1 and 0.2% in Poland. So there's, it's a rare breed. And sometimes people think we're a cult because of that. But just try and do what Scripture says faithfully. Thanks for your question, sir. Others, questions? Yes, sir.
I have some question. Have you been raised in the? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I would like to ask about. Have you been raised in church family, or did you meet Jesus later as adult man?
Yes, the question is, was I raised in or around the church, or did I meet Jesus later? My mom was a faithful churchgoer all my youth, and I'm thankful that she brought me, but she brought me against my will, and I just went because Mom made me go. And the church that I grew up in was not a strong church. I can't say that it preached the gospel faithfully or taught God's word faithfully, but it was a loving community. And what that did was instilled in me a rhythm of going. My dad did not come, except for on Christmas and Easter. And that's because he worked 7 days a week. I can remember my mom bringing me up to one of the fields where my dad was sitting on a tractor to say goodbye on a Sunday morning. And I said, Mom, I just want to stay with Dad and work. And Mom said, no, we're going. Man, I'm grateful she did. So it wasn't really until high school and especially college, though, in a university setting, surprisingly very secular, very antagonistic to Christianity. My professors often mocked my faith, mocked biblical Christianity, outright scorned it in the classroom or attacked the Bible directly. But what that did was made me more curious, and it made me go back and research things and read scriptures for myself. Began to study the Gospel of John in college, to read it for myself, and for the first time saw the courage, the beauty, the magnificence of the person and work of Jesus. And I was so compelled by that I left what I would say was my addiction to alcohol, my addiction to other things, my idolatry of things like football, to follow Jesus. That changed my life, especially around the age of 21. Okay. Thanks for your question. Other questions? Yes, please.
I just wanted to ask about the denomination of Christianity, which you Catholic, Protestant, Evangelical.
Yeah.
What
Current one, Teraz?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in Grodzisk Mazowiecki, this is a Protestant church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, broadly Protestant. We don't identify with a specific denomination, though we have good relationships with other Protestant churches in our area or around Poland. In fact, once a month, Protestant Christians from around Poland gather, and we have almost kind of like a Bible college where we work Friday night and Saturday all day to study the scriptures, different topics of theology, even some introduction to Greek and Hebrew language. So we're not sort of Pentecostal or Baptistic, we would call ourselves Christians. And we have good relationships with those who are in different denominations.
Okay, just follow-up question,
Yes.
kind of. Like in Poland, the Catholicism is the main denomination. So I wanted to ask: have you been in the typical Polish Catholic Church?
Yes, thanks for your
Because
question.
Also, I think the masses are different in Poland. It's very grand and not as different in America.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. Thanks for your question. We've not attended a Polish Mass, Polish gathering church on a Sunday morning or a Mass during the week. We've been in the buildings during the week when those things are happening. Na przykład, Środa, on a Wednesday, we visited churches in Kraków or Warszawa i tak dalej. But we wouldn't attend a Mass to join in with that. You're right. There's a important difference in how we understand, for example, not just the importance, but what happens during those things. And that'd be something that's difficult to address in brief, I think in a respectful way, but I'd be happy to follow up with later. When we gather and celebrate, I think if you were to come and sort of watch, it would remind you very much of what you see, for example, in the book of Acts, where the early church gathered in some beautiful and simple ways without the ornateness, where we gather in simple ways to preach, to sing, to pray. So there's just I don't know how to describe it, a beauty and almost an earthiness to what we do. I think its beauty is its simplicity. There's still a formalness to it, but the theology that leads us, what we believe leads us, is the authority of a book, God's Word, not tradition or not ceremony. So there would be some pretty substantial differences. Yeah. And I mean that, of course, in a very respectful way. I've studied Catholicism. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I want to know and understand our context well, and so far as I can be very respectful of it, very understanding of it, even if I differ from it in some very important ways. Okay? Thank you for your questions. These are very astute and honest questions. I really appreciate that. Others? Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for coming here, first of all. I'm grateful myself. And I may have two questions. The first one is whether you have a proverb, perhaps, that you live by. And how do you find life in Poland with your family?
Yeah, thank you. A proverb to live by. This passage is more than a proverb, but it has guided our life and our choices. There's a little song, a little ditty would be the English word. It's not common, but a poem. And it goes like this. Only one life will soon be past, and only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life will soon be past, and only what's done for Christ will last. And when I die, how happy I'll be if the light of my life has been burned out for thee. Most people would say, a little religion's okay, Tanner. Just don't get too serious about it. And I would say what Jesus says is it's really an all or nothing, I certainly don't live a perfect life. I'm not free from sin myself. But Jesus doesn't give an option like, he says you can serve one master or another. You can serve yourself, the world, or you can serve Jesus. And so that's my creed, if I will, is when Jesus says the foxes of the earth have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man, that's him speaking about himself, has nowhere to lay his head. In other words, he was a stranger and wanderer in this world, not simply a great moral teacher, but actually God in the flesh who died and rose again. And if that's true, that changes everything. If it's not, then it's just a farce and I'm wasting my life. You can't say, Tanner, it's good you like that and you're passionate about that, and good for you if it works out for you. No, if Jesus didn't raise from the dead, don't you understand everything I've done is senseless? I've given up millions and millions and millions of dollars in assets and a life of beauty. God, I love my life. I don't count it as a sacrifice. I just couldn't be happier doing what I do. My life's never been more full of joy, happiness. So that's the answer to the first question, or as best as I can do. How is our family founded in Poland? I think because of our church, wonderful. And we have a spiritual community there that's warmly welcomed us in, happily welcomed us in, and we feel like, okay, these are our people. But we also, I don't mean this in a flattering way, we love being in Poland. Let's be honest, the Polish language is very difficult. Polskiego jest bardzo trudne. But we're doing our best to learn it, and Poles are very patient with us while we do. We like the food. We like pierogis. We love traveling around. We like Polish culture. We really enjoy it here. We hope to stay here for a long time. So we're not just seeking to fly in, fly out. We want to stay and get to know Poland better. We just celebrated a year here, so we have lots to learn, much to understand, but we really like it here. And I think you should like it here. I mean, I can just say we've traveled around the world a little bit. Poland's a beautiful place with a beautiful and tragic history. And we love understanding that history, reading about your history, visiting significant historical sites. Anything to add, sweetheart? Okay. Children, anything to add? How would you answer that question? How have you found your first year in Poland, Timothy? What do you think of it so far? You want to think on that a little bit? Yeah, Megs, Harmony, anything to add?
I don't think so. I really enjoyed living here.
Meg says she's really enjoyed living here. And I think we can say that as a family. Has the adjustment been difficult at times? Oczywiście. Ale bardzo lubimy Polskę. No. We've been around very good, godly friends. It's true. Yeah. Harmony? No? Okay. Okay, let's move on to part 2 then. I'll take some more questions here in a little bit. Part 2, how about them cowboys? There's a song. Boy, music's important, isn't it? What we sing on a Sunday morning, our church is important. I grew up around country music, especially 80s and 90s country music. Anybody know any country music songs? You guys do. We listened to some yesterday on the way down here. What do you know, sir? Country music, any songs come to mind? Or even artists? Johnny Cash, you bet. One of the most well-known. Hank Williams, you bet. Yeah. Veronica?
Oh, yeah, I would have to say Johnny Cash as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also some of the
Alan Jackson. I like Alan Jackson. Krzysztof. Yeah. George Strait. Garth Brooks, Randy Travis. Tough to find a more pure voice than Randy Travis, isn't it? Josh Turner. What were you going to say? Oh, somebody else raised their hand? Yes, Tim? Josh Turner, Black Hawk, beautiful harmony. There's a song where I borrowed this title from. It's called How About Them Cowgirls? So I changed it to Cowboys. We sing quite a bit around our home, and sometimes we play some of this old music. In our home growing up, sometimes we used to sing this one. Should have been a cowboy. You know this one? Should have learned to rope and ride. I'd be wearing those 6-shooters, riding my pony on a cattle drive, stealing a young girl's heart, just like Gene and Roy, singing those campfire songs. Oh, I should have been a cowboy. That kind of plays into that popular pop culture cowboy, doesn't it? But then there's another one that goes like this. So that one says, I should have been a cowboy. This one goes, Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. You know that one? Don't let them pick guitars and drive them old trucks. Let them be doctors and lawyers and such. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Cowboy life is a funny life. Let me explain a little bit more about it. This picture is significant. Why? You look up cowboy in the encyclopedia, this is the picture that should be there. These are 10 of the best cowboys you'd ever meet. These 10 cowboys would gather once a year, 4 horses apiece, for 10 days and ride the wildness of Montana in what is the last real roundup, and probably all of America. Now, these 10 cowboys know this country, ride it rough, ride it fast. They need 4 horses because they ride one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and then the next day, to be careful with their horses, they switch horses. It's so hard. It's so rigorous. My dad was roundup boss for 20 years. Sorry. 20 years he led this roundup, and now they've made a movie about it. It's called The Last Roundup Remains. It's a bit vulgar. I can't recommend it in a good conscience, but they put GoPros on dogs, and they flew drones, and they came out and documented it for 5 years, and then they made a film. They just flew my dad out to New York, if you can believe it, for a premiere of this video. Dad would never imagine this, but these are some cowboys. These are some cowboys. You'll never see them in Hollywood, but these are some cowboys. Let me tell you a little bit about Montana, big sky country. It didn't get statehood until 1889. That makes it pretty young, doesn't it? Yes, question.
What is the purpose of those roundups?
Good question. So when we would take our cows up the road and turn them onto that public property, so would a lot of other cowboys and ranches. 2,300 head of cattle were turned out onto this wild country. And then for 10 days, those cowboys would round up all of those cows, bring them to a central spot, and based on their ear tag and their brand, sort them. And then those cowboys, those ranches would come up and gather their cattle and bring them back. Yeah. Sometimes Montana's called the last best place, and it is pretty rugged and rural still. Over time, Montana's economy transformed from mining, the gold rush, the Copper Butte mine, to agriculture, including cattle ranching. Now, Montana has 2.16 million cattle, which means we have twice as many cows as we do people. There's more elk and deer in Montana than there are people. I remember when when it surpassed 1 million people for the first time, and there was a state day of mourning and sadness that we'd finally broke the 1 million people barrier. People in Montana are wonderfully hospitable sometimes, but they're also pretty protective of their state. In fact, I remember a bumper sticker. You know what a bumper sticker is on the back of a car? And the Montana bumper sticker for a long time said, "Montana's full. I heard North Dakota's nice." I thought this would be interesting for you. Montana jest prawie dokładnie tak samo, jaki jest size po polsku? It's almost exactly the same size as Poland. It's the fourth largest state in the US, almost exactly. But Poland has between 38 million people. We have 1 million people. Here's a picture that I grew up with on my wall. This is outside of Miles City, Montana. This is when the era of open range was coming to an end due to the use of barbed wire, harsh winters, increased settlement. This was the late 1800s, early 1900s, probably around the time of 1910. Let me talk to you a little bit about cowboying. Oh, we use that as a verb, by the way, too, cowboying. I don't think you'll find it in the dictionary, but cowboys, what do? They cowboy or they go cowboying. Here's some common misconceptions. Cowboys and ranchers lack education. They're just a bunch of, spit on the ground, tobacco chewing men who don't know left hand from right. No, actually, cowboys have to study, modern ranchers have to study and keep up and continue learning with the changing landscape and changing times and changing technology. Many study animal science or environmental science or business management. Many engage in lifelong learning, conferences, in order to stay competitive in the industry. Some popular media, particularly shows like Yellowstone, glamorize ranch life, depicting it as luxurious or dramatic. But in reality, the demanding lifestyle involves long hours, hard work, challenging conditions. Every winter, Montana gets down to Fahrenheit and Celsius are the same at about -40. Okay. Montana gets down to -20, -30, even sometimes -40 degrees in the winter. And cowboys have to keep their animals alive or care for them in these harsh climates. Sometimes there's droughts and harsh warm weather. A prevalent myth is that animals abuse their animals, whereas most ranchers understand that healthy, well cared for animals are crucial for their livelihood. Nobody cared for animals better than my dad. He loved them, he cared for them, not just from an economic standpoint, but because he loved his animals. What are some modern challenges? Low profit margins. I put there cowboys are a blend of sunshine and earth and hard work and gritty persistence. Their lifestyle is under threat from modern economic pressures. They remain a vital part of Montana's identity. Cowboy stories and heritage are essential for understanding our nation's history and culture. Despite the image of cowboys, many face difficult economic challenges. Many ranchers and cowboys are having to sell their ranches because the bank owns them or they can't pay their loans. Older generations retire. Fewer young people enter into the profession, raising concerns about the future of ranching and cowboying in places like Montana. So low profit margins, unpredictable weather, raising land prices, generational interest, changing technology and regulations are difficult challenges that modern cowboys face. This is a beautiful picture where those 10 cowboys gather for 10 days and ride horses. This is the barn where they saddle up in the morning. It's called the Cow Camp. Beautiful little place tucked in the mountains, and that's a no-filter picture of some rainbows up there. If you really want to see what life on a Montana ranch is like, there's probably no better account to look to than Trinity, I forget how to say his last name, Vandenaker. Trinity is a family friend, especially of my brother-in-law Scott, and he's come and done some neat documentaries up at the ranch. He really does a good job interviewing, documenting in really clear ways. He just sticks a GoPro on his cowboy hat and rides around the ranch through the brush, comes up. He's done a couple neat shows at our house. This one's called He Died in the Saddle. That would be my great-grandpa, who Dad tells the story on this video, but he was riding after a hard day. He was coming back to the house on his horse, and they'd successfully moved the cows from one pasture to another. And he looked off in the distance. You can see the horizon from a fair bit on a hill above our ranch. He looked off in the distance and he saw some storm clouds rolling in, and he goes, "Well, boys, looks like we beat the storm." And he had a heart attack and died and fell out of his saddle right there. Dad tells that story on this video to Trinity, so it's called He Died in the Saddle. Couldn't have died happier. He did. He did. There's another one that that just came out Trinity has about 300,000 subscribers. You can find him easily just searching on his name there. Here's me shaking his hand on one of his videos. He left his house and came up, and I'm just explaining it to him there. This is often the sentiment. Montanans are ready for Yellowstone. That's the movie series to end. That's not all bad. I've never seen it myself, to be honest with you. But it has brought a lot of unwelcome visitors and misconceptions about Montana. I'm not here to rag on the series. I'm just telling you how a lot of Montanans view it. My wife and I lived very near to Yellowstone for about 10 years. And I even baptized a guy in the Yellowstone River down there. Okay, so we're real familiar with the area. Is the TV series Yellowstone true to Montana ranch life? As a person who has lived, worked, this isn't me, I put the source down there, lived, worked, and raised my family in Montana for the last 26 years, the first season of Yellowstone was hard to swallow. Not only do real ranchers here travel by truck and not by helicopter, the typical ranch houses, barns, and cabins of family operation, a working cattle ranch, do not look like that. It's a much more hardcore, rough, and humble lifestyle. People are rugged, weathered, and exhausted from working 10-hour days outside in temperatures ranging from 100 degrees above to 40 below, often 7 days a week. That's just real ranching. That's no surprise to you. I've just told you that. I put a picture on here. I really like this picture. I took this right after this calf was born. We watched it come out of its mother and fall on the ground there, and then the mother turned around and saw us. And she looked at me through two blazing eyes. So I wrote, "What's a cowboy's cow like?" Well, she's protective, she's fast, she's mean, and she's beautiful. Motherly instincts kink in those times, and cowboy has to get in there at some point and stick an ear tag to identify that calf. Sometimes the calves don't come out easily, and so the cowboys are up during the middle of the night for 2 months. They do night shifts and work nights to make sure those calves are born safely. Sometimes they have to help pull or assist that mother, but there's as fresh as you can get, and the snot's coming out of her mouth. You know? She's just a good mother cow. I remember riding around on the ranch with my dad, and it seemed like he knew every cow. Every cow has a tag and a brand, and every cow's tag has 4 numbers. 2 deal with the year that she was born, and 2 are just a number of identification. Drive by and Dad says, "Oh yeah, that's 4519. She had a rough bag last year, but she's a good mom. I'll keep her around a couple more years." Oh yeah, that's 5413. She's been a good mother. She had 1 bum calf, but from there on out, she's good. Oh, that's mean old 8921. Just stay away from her. You know, it was like they were his pets. They couldn't be. There was 400 of them, but boy, he loved his cows. Any questions about that? Okay, I just wanted to give you a bit more of some academia there, some learning, if you will.
Hi.
Just a second. Go ahead.
Hello. I was wondering, we were talking some things about Yellowstone, right?
Yeah.
The series. I was very interested to know what you think about it as an authentic and real cowboy.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the series and how cinema portrays cowboys in general?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Good question. Great command of the English language, by the way. I've not seen the show personally, so I'm hesitant to comment. I think these kind of sentiments that you see here would be fairly well shared across the cowboy community. My sense is also very few cowboys have actually watched it because they don't care. You know, they're not interested in it. I'm not here to criticize the series, but it dramatizes violence, I understand. You know, most cowboys aren't carrying guns around to protect themselves from bad neighbors. In fact, none of them are. They might be carrying them around to protect themselves or their cattle from animals, you know, from carnivores and predators. But no, things with neighbors are tough sometimes. Tough relationships with neighbors sometimes. Also very good relationships with neighbors sometimes. I'll talk more about the cowboy community in a second. Yeah, I can't comment on it too much because I haven't watched it, and I don't want to present a straw man argument if I haven't seen it. Thanks for your question. Veronica.
Just a quick one. How about Western movies? What do you think about classical Western, the romanticized way of Western writing into the?
My wife and I have enjoyed some Western movies and some Western books. Louis L'Amour, personal favorite. We read one on our honeymoon, and we've read a lot of them since. My dad enjoys old Westerns. They're dramatic, and they're shoot-ups. That's not how the West really was. Of course, there were rough days, and there were kind of a vigilante stories, but it's kind of like what Hollywood does to anything else, isn't it? Trinity just does the kind of sun-up that guy I was telling you about. He does just kind of the sun-up to sundown routine of a cowboy. And he presents that really well, and it gets hundreds of thousands of views. So I think there's something to be said for the normalcy. Hollywood doesn't think that will sell, so it kind of dresses it up. But people seem to, I just looked last night where I grabbed these screenshots and looked at the comments. Oh, watching from France, really enjoyed the show. Oh, all the way from Estonia, and really enjoying learning about ranch life. So people from all over the world just enjoy kind of the earthiness of this. Harmony, you had a question up here, Pavel, for the microphone. Oh, you didn't, I'm sorry. Timothy, did you have a question?
Never go something.
Sorry?
What's the never go?
Where's it at? Oh, never go here. I don't know. That's kind of a dramatization also, isn't it? Yep. Okay. Thanks for your intelligent question. Should we move on to part 3, the story of a cowboy? I still have somebody I want to introduce you to. In the first picture, it was his hat was down, but this is my old man. This is my pa. This is my dad. This is the man who I hopped in the saddle with from the time before I could walk. And I love this old cowboy. And I'd love for you to meet him. My Thanksgiving lecture, I explained how my family first came to the States on the Mayflower. You know what the Mayflower is? Okay, my 13th generation great-grandfather was John Alden. Tradition says that he was the first to step foot on Plymouth Rock coming off of the Mayflower. And we can trace on my mother's side our history back to him. Here's a painting of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins, his first wife, who was on the Mayflower also on that first Thanksgiving day. Obviously, we didn't have apparat, we didn't have cameras back then, but here's dramatis. Here's the picture of their gravestones, and I showed you this picture of a roundup. Well, some 9 generations later, my family moved out to Montana from New York. On the left here, we have John Bauer, my great-grandpa, who was born in 1889 in Stanford, Montana, a town that was named after Stanford, New York, from my great-great-grandparents who moved out there. He died in 1960. He's the one who died falling out of the saddle. On the right, we have George C. Bauer, my great-great-grandpa, who was born in 1851. Sorry, John Bauer here on the left was born in 1936, died in, he was born in 1889 in Stanford, died in 1960. Great-great-grandfather was born in 1851. That's George C. Bauer. He was married to Alice Orilla Alden. Same family name as John Alden. So there's the family history. Okay. So George C. Bauer was born in Dutchess County, New York, but then moved out and started a sheep ranch with his brothers. It was called Bauer Brothers. And here's a picture during their wool shear. It was the biggest in the state in that year. They owned that sheep ranch from 1881 to 1908. There's big carriages of horses, and everything there is wool shorn or cut from sheep. And so that's them shipping that off. Here's a picture of my dad as a kid. Wanted to be a cowboy from the time he was young. Here's Dad and some of his friends fishing. And here's a picture of a cowboy. That's not going to show up in a Western film, is it? But cowboys are normal people too. They enjoy recreation. There he is catching a big lake trout. Dad loved his horses, but he really loved his draft horses. Here he is pulling a hay wagon. Here's a picture of him and Mom getting married. And here's him and Mom growing in love for each other on another wagon. Mom's riding Duke, and I think Dad's riding Rusty there. Eventually they had kids. And there's my oldest sister being raised at the ranch, and there's the three of us being raised at the ranch. You're about to see that cook stove there in just a second again. And here's the old man. Would you like to meet him? Let's see if we can pull him up. Okay. Sorry for the... Are we on, Dad? Okay, let's try this. It's approximately 4 in the morning in Montana, but let's see if we can get Dad. It didn't go through there. Let's see. Might have to pull him up on my telephone, which would not be ideal, I know, but probably be better than nothing. Let's see. Pavel, can we borrow? He's not asleep. He's up at, well, he'd be up at 4 or 5 in the morning if it wasn't for this call, but he got up at 3 for this call. Oh, there we go. I can't see that real well. There we go. The audio is going to be a little bit weak. It'll just be from my computer, okay? So we'll have to deal with that. Do you want the microphone up here, Pavel? I bet if I stick my microphone here, then we can hear the audio a little bit. Whoops, we came unplugged. Filechka. Okay. Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Dad, welcome to the university classroom.
Good morning, thank you.
Can you see me and hear me okay?
Yeah, just fine.
Dad, what are you sitting on?
I'm sitting on the old wood cook stove.
I just showed them a family picture from a long time ago with the old wood cook stove in it. Oh, look at there, he's got a fire in it this morning. What's the temperature?
It's kind of chilly and rainy this morning. Finally, we're really dry, so we're blessed to have the rain.
Good. Dad, there's a bunch of students here, and I've just been telling them, as you know, a little bit about my childhood and then about the cowboy culture and cowboy life. Thanks for joining us at 4 a.m.
No problem.
Okay, I'm going to ask Dad some questions, and then if you guys want, you can ask Dad some questions too, okay? Yeah. Okay. Dad, I'm going to start at the beginning.
Okay.
Why'd you become a cowboy? Why'd you want to become a cowboy?
Well, I guess all little kids kind of want to be a cowboy at some time, and maybe I just didn't grow out of it.
You grew into it.
Just kind of happened. That's the path the Lord sent me down, I guess.
Yeah, good. Dad, your dad wasn't a cowboy. How did you meet Mom and come to the ranch?
Well, we met up at a place that I grew up at Lincoln, Montana, and she was pumping gas across the street from where I was pumping gas.
That's a romantic story, isn't it?
And then I followed her back to the ranch.
Yep. Dad, most of these students have never met a Montana cowboy. It's probably fair to say none of them have. If you were to describe a cowboy to somebody who's never met one, what would you say? What comes to mind? How could you paint a picture?
I guess a cowboy is someone that rides a horse and chases cows and is out in the great outdoors all the time, or a lot of the time, and a lot of them work a dog. I love my dogs and love to work them, and so they're just someone that's outside with animals mostly.
Now, when you say work a dog, what do you mean by that?
Well, a dog can be so much help. They can take the place of 10 riders. The cows just hate a dog, and a dog can worry them and work them and keep them in a group and can help you in so many ways.
Cows really learn to respect a dog after a while, don't they?
Yeah, they sure do.
Dad, you tell me if this is an exaggeration, but I remember Cindy, one of our dogs, the way she would round up the cows during calving time. It was like with one word you could send her out and she'd round up 200-300 cows by herself without a single bark and bring them in for you.
Yeah, she sure could. She could do it in the dark at night for you.
What was your favorite cow dog?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think every one you get maybe gets a little better as you learn to work them.
Yeah.
It's hardly a dog. It's the person that trains them.
Yeah. Dad, what are...
Border collies.
Go ahead.
The border collies just love to please you so much, and they're by far the best working dogs.
I remember that. I remember she didn't want to play with me. She just wanted to please you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good model even of our relationship with the Lord. We just want to please him.
For sure.
Yeah. What are some of the lessons that cowboying has taught you, Dad?
Oh gosh, I guess the biggest one would be patience. Animals work at their own pace no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn to be patient with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, Mom, are you there this morning as well? You don't have to make an appearance, but can you hear my voice?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi. Love you.
I love you.
Hey, could you turn the light on in the living room just so we get a little bit more light on Dad's side of his face there? Thanks. Yeah, that's better. Thanks. Dad, what are some of your favorite memories of being a cowboy or of cowboying at the ranch?
Oh gosh, I guess a lot of them involve horses and dogs that I've had over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And riding with other good cowboys.
Did you ever have a favorite horse? I know it's hard to choose.
Yeah, I did. I had a horse named Rusty. That was an incredible horse.
Yeah. Excuse me. I was telling him about Rusty a little bit earlier.
Yeah, Rusty would not let a cow get away from him. He just worked so hard.
Yeah. What appealed to you about the cowboy life? What drew you to it?
You know, I don't know. I guess my grandpa was a cowboy. I was raised with cows. Mm-hmm. My dad had a big Hereford ranch, mm-hmm. and I raised around, and you know, I just always liked being a cowboy.
I told the students here that cowboying was easy, Dad. You sleep in till 10 and don't do much the rest of the day. Just, you know. I'm joking. I told them that cowboying was easy. You don't really do much. You just kind of sit around.
Yeah, that's right.
Dad, what are some of the... Sorry.
It felt normal. 3 o'clock, I thought I was getting up to go check cows.
He says it felt normal to get up at 3 o'clock. He felt like he was going to get ready to check cows during calving season. What are some of the hard parts about cowboy life? Some of the parts that they might not see on television?
I guess one of the hardest parts is the physical hard labor, the long hours, working in cold, hot weather, all kinds of weather, wet and cold and tired. And there's new challenges all the time. Now we have the new challenge of predators. They've introduced wolves and grizzly bears, and so now we have that new challenge. It seems like there's new challenges all the time.
Yep. Yep. Do you think there's some common misunderstandings people have about cowboy life?
Well, yeah, it's hard to put on TV what it's really like. There's programs on TV now that depict it pretty good. There's one I've been watching called 1880 Drifters. That's a really good cowboy documentary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dad, I told the students and professors here a bit about the roundup. Can you give us a little bit more context about the roundup? Why would 10 cowboys do something like that?
Well, because cattle are all required. We turn cattle up there for 90 days, starting in 1st of July. We can turn cattle up onto a national forest allotment where we pay to go up there and graze for 90 days, and the government requires the cattle to all be off of there on a certain day. So in order to do that, you have to hire a crew to go up there and work and get them all off by your due date. And so a lot of ranchers nowadays don't have horses even, and so hire a cowboy crew to go up and get the job done.
Now that was hard work, but did you ever enjoy it?
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it. It was kind of the highlight of my year. Yeah.
You did it for how long?
40 years.
Yeah, yeah. Around 20 of those years you were roundup boss?
Yeah, probably about
that. Grandpa Dave, he was roundup boss before you?
No, usually the president of the Grazing Association was the boss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Grandpa Dave had the record for riding up there the most years. He rode up there 50 years without missing a day.
Yeah. How old was he on his last roundup? Do you remember?
He was 80.
Yeah. That's a lot of riding for an 80-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why did you eventually decide to not ride roundup anymore?
Well, my body just kind of wore out. My shoulders needed work on them, and I had my hips replaced and ankles fused, and my body just kind of wore out, I guess.
Why is your body so worn out, Dad?
Just from the hard work. 50 years ago, we didn't have tractors to do the work. I mean, hydraulic tractors to handle hay and different things. Post hole augers, all your fencing was done by hand and digging post holes and handling little square bales and feeding with a team of horses, and it was just so demanding on your body, I guess, is why I wore it.
I seem to recall it has something to do with a few wrecks you had on horses too.
Yeah, that was part of it, yeah.
When I say wrecks, students, I'm referring to getting bucked off a horse and being in a dangerous situation. Dad's been on so many horses for so long, he's bound to have had some what we call wrecks that have been quite dangerous, including getting drug, getting his foot caught in a stirrup.
Yeah, I've been bucked off and stepped on and kicked and bit and laid on, and yeah, it's hard on your body.
Yeah.
It was almost my fault though.
Never the horse's fault, or rarely, huh?
Well, usually you could have done something to prevent it.
Mm-hmm.
After things over with, you can think back and say, no, if I wouldn't have done that, well, that wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Students, I have just a couple more questions for him, but do you guys have any questions for Dad? Yes, please. Got a student here in the back with a question, Dad. I'll repeat it for you if you can't hear.
What are the specifics of the riding style? Because we in Europe are more familiar with the English style, and of course there's the Western style, but it's not very popular. It's not visible. It's not a working style in here. So what are the specifics? And there are certain tricks or certain movements that are only reserved for working Western riding.
Were you able to hear that, Dad?
No.
The question, that's all right. The question revolved around the difference between English style and Western style riding. Tell us a little bit about the Western saddle, why it was designed the way it is. Are there specific skills or techniques that are required?
Western saddle is made more for keeping you in the saddle under when you're running and turning and stopping and chasing and working cows, jumping timber and up and down hill, and it's designed more to hold you in the saddle. I've never ridden English style, but
it might be a decent question actually afterwards for our kids who spent the first 10, 11, 7 years of their life riding Western and now ride English style in Grodzisk where we live. They have lessons once a week. So Mags, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's a completely different shape than the English style.
Oh, Dad's going to show us a couple of his saddles here. Dad, tell us about this saddle.
this is an old saddle that I still use. It was made by a saddle maker named George Lawrence, and it's about 100 years old. It was my granddad's saddle. I still use it.
Dad, the saddle you most ride, it's my favorite one with the silver horn on it.
Yeah.
Why do you ride that saddle? Whose was it?
That was also a saddle my grandpa's, and I rode one of that belonged to Susie's grandpa for a while too.
Mm-hmm.
It was an old horn fitter that Susie's grandpa actually died in it, had a heart attack, fell out of the saddle.
I told him about that just after he told him that they beat the storm, right?
Yeah.
I seem to recall one of them was the saddle that belonged to the doctor that delivered your mom?
Yes, that's the one you just saw right there.
Okay, so that saddle belonged to the doctor that delivered your mom.
Yes.
That's special. It seems almost like you develop a certain affection for a saddle after a while. Why is it, Dad?
You know, I don't know. It means something to ride, to use that belonged to your granddad.
Mm-hmm.
And he's liked older saddles better than newer ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's almost like a different tool you use where it becomes an extension of your body. You become so familiar in the seat, how it holds you in or keeps you, and how to use it just right.
Yes.
Any other questions? Timothy, question for Papa?
Papa, do you want to tell him about the story when you got shot?
He said, could you hear him, Dad? Could you hear?
Hear him.
Yeah. He wondered if you wanted to tell him about the story where you got shot, but I'm not sure we have time for that today.
Well, probably not.
Yeah.
Something that I did I shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I just got done telling him that most cowboys don't shoot each other and carry stuff like sidearms, but maybe you're the exception to that. No, it wasn't a criminal situation, but it was an accident. Other questions?
I have one.
Please.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for being with us at such an early hour. I just wanted to ask if you have ever taken into consideration that such a harsh life of a cowboy, have you ever had any doubts after, deciding on this lifestyle? And if so, what kept you going?
Dad, the question was, this is a pretty harsh lifestyle. It's real difficult at times. Did you ever have second thoughts or doubts about it? Did you ever consider different careers or getting out of it?
Of course, yeah, there's some really hard times, depression times. Probably the worst part of it was the financial strain. It's hard to make a ranch work.
Yeah. Dad, sometimes I've told people, you tell me if this is accurate, but I've tried to explain ranching, cowboying is kind of like being land rich and cash poor.
Yeah, that's right. It would be easy to sell out and have lots of money. Land is worth a lot of money. That's what's happening to most of the ranches around in this area now is people with lots of money come in and buy them and use them for recreation instead of having cattle on them.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a dying way of life.
Yeah. Yeah. How about one final question for Dad? Dad, I got a final question for you. Is there anything, you love ranching, you love cowboying a lot. Of course, I'm your son, I think this, but I think you're the best cowboy there ever was. What do you love? Is there anything you love more than cowboying?
Yeah, I love the Lord Jesus and my family more.
Yeah. Thanks for your honesty, Dad. Thanks for being with us.
Well, it's a pleasure.
We love you lots. You want to say hi, kids?
I love you all.
Izzy and the kids say hi. Hang on just a second here, Dad. I'll give you a little better view of the classroom. Okay. There's one end. And you guys wave to Dad. There's Izzy over there. Stephanie. Whoop. There we go. Okay. Love you lots. Love you, Mom. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
No. Okay, talk to you later.
Okay.
Enjoy your morning. Let me know what you read in the Bible.
Okay.
See ya. Okay, there we go. Well, I hope you enjoyed an opportunity to meet whom I affectionately call the old man. Whoops. I sure love him an awful lot. Is that all right? Okay, good. Just move this out of the way a little bit. Krzysztof, do you have a paper towel or something? I spilled a little bit of water. I think it's far enough away from the technology. Okay, let me move through this last bit of the presentation here quickly because I think we're nearly out of time. It's hard to pick a favorite picture, but if I had to pick, it might be this one. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Why this one? Well, for one thing, this is a very special time of year. This is the time of year that Harmony was referring to a little bit ago. This is branding time. And this is where we have to mark the cattle, and that's me as a little kid, and that's Dad. Why do I like the picture? Well, because Dad's got what we call a smirk on his face. He's watching his son. Thank you, Krzysztof. That's perfect. Appreciate it. It's not much, just enough to need a few tissues. Dad's got a smirk on his face as he looks at his boy there because he's just enjoying time with his son on branding day. My grandpa Clyde's there, and my uncle Art is there. He's not my uncle, but just like you sometimes, use Wujek or Chocha to refer to somebody that you appreciate. I should get back to this, shouldn't I? So also Uncle Art. Uncle Art was a very special cowboy to me, one of my dad's most loyal friends. And he taught me how to castrate cattle. He taught me how to take care of cattle. He taught me a lot about cattle. He's in that picture. And then my Uncle Brian is in the background there. But I love the smirk that's on my dad's face because it communicates something. Dad and I had a good relationship growing up. Never been better than it is now. And I'm sure he did, but I can't recall a lot of times where I knew that he was real proud of me. He was real pleased with my performance. But here he is, because I'm just Timothy's age, eating a Rocky Mountain oyster there and enjoying time at the ranch. Let me tell you about one other time as I wrap up our time here. Dad and I were up in the mountains with Art, this cowboy here. I think that's Uncle Art, yeah. And we were up on a steep side hill, and I was riding a horse called Lefty. Lefty was named Lefty because his left ear was bent and cocked a little bit. He looked kind of funny. I think he was part Arabian, part quarter horse, and he was fast. And he was probably the most aggressive horse I'd ever had. And I showed you the picture of those cows a little bit ago. They're great animals, but man, they're stubborn sometimes. And we were up on a steep side hill, and this old gal took off down the hill at kind of a breakneck speed, bardzo szybko. And Dad said, "Get her!" And so I took off on Lefty, quick as I could down the hill. And she was just screaming. I mean, she was going fast, this old cow was. And I was right beside her, bouncing and doing the best I could to stay in the saddle. And I was probably 13 years old, I don't know. And Dad hollers, "Stay with her!" And I was just, for all I'm worth, going, trying to pull my legs down and stay in the saddle and waving her off, trying to get her to turn a little bit. Sorry. And I stayed with her. And Dad hollered from down below where he was. He goes, "That's my boy!" Just like that. And that's always stuck with me. It's the kind of relationship Dad and I had. And your kids don't always act the way you want them to or do the things you want them to. And this parenting relationship is beautiful but difficult. It was a special moment for Dad and I. His dad and mom, as they grew older, and that's just a little bit ago, and that's Papa. That's Papa, sweetie, and Grandma. And you'd be happy to know last November they came to Poland as well. And surprise, kids, they'll be coming back again this year. So that's pretty special. Dad's got a lot of close and loyal friends. I called it the partnership of cowboys. Cowboys aren't lone rangers. They do spend a lot of time alone, but not all their time. This is that roundup group again. There's roundup through the years. That's a tough group of cowboys. And there's a more modern picture. Roundup is still going today, including there on the far left is a guy I appreciate, Ty McDonald, the guy I played football with and a good friend, a good cowboy. Dad's a cowboy always, even on airplanes. This is just a picture I took while we're bringing cows down the road. Montana cowboys embody a rich cultural heritage, deeply intertwined with state's rugged landscape and ranching traditions. It's not merely a job. It's a way of life that's persisted for generations. There's Dad. There's him driving a team of what are called Clydesdales, draft horses. There's another picture of him recently. Talk about generational cowboy, and nothing gives Dad more joy than seeing his kids and grandkids enjoy the ranch. So here's some pictures with them. And There's a picture of our extended family. There's my brother-in-law, Scott, in the blue shirt, Paul and his wife, Willow, Adam and Sheena, and their kids. And of course, this is 3 of us. Izzy's been born since then. Oh, and my grandma there who grew up on the ranch. They moved to the ranch from Stanford, a great Lost Lake area when she was 4. So I would have been 5th generation ranching if you count sheep, 4th generation if you don't. There's a picture of me with my brother-in-law, and there's one of Dad and Harmony driving what's called an old John Deere R tractor in a local parade. There's a picture of my favorite spot on earth outside of Sunday mornings at the ranch. Outside of Sunday mornings with our church, there's no place I'd rather be than right here at the cabin. There's a no-filter picture I took of the ranch when I was out there one day. Wanted to end with a poem, and then I'll ask for some questions if we have remaining time. This is something I found a long time ago and actually just dug up this very morning. I saved it for someday when Dad goes to meet Jesus face to face. Because of his relationship with him, we believe that someday he'll see him as he is. That's the promise of Scripture. So I saved this quote for his funeral. It's Memorial Day someday. Think cowboy and someone pictures a man riding a horse. He does do that, but he is so much more. A real cowboy is kind and humble. Remember, he rides a horse. He has respect for others. He stands at attention and puts his hat over his heart when the National Anthem is played. He upholds the law. He bows his head and gives thanks before he eats. He believes in fair dealing. He knows you are what you say and do. His word is a contract. He says what he means and he means what he says. He says yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, or no, ma'am. He cares for his animals. He takes his hat off when he comes inside. He says hello with a firm, a gentle handshake. Is there any wonder why kids grow up wanting to be cowboys, or what? Any wonder why kids want to be cowboys? Many kids do. Not all kids have that opportunity, but Dad did, and I did, and I'm grateful for it. Any final questions? Thanks so much for your attentiveness and for your time. Even if it was just getting out of an exam, I'm helpful you're here, and I pray it was impactful for you. I'll hang around afterwards, and I'm happy to visit or converse more with you.
Well, thank you very much, Tanner. Thank you for the Ripleys. I'm sure it's not our final meeting with the Ripleys. I'm sure we will meet each other again in Lublin soon. Thank you very much for your honest and deepened lecture on what a cowboy really means. And I think this word would never mean the same for us since now. So, this was the opening event of Cowboy Week in American Corner. And may I say that I think we opened it up pretty strong. The bar is high, but guess what? On Thursday in Między Słowami, the coffee shop in Lublin, I think you know it, please visit our Facebook page for details. We're going to meet with a couple who sings traditional country music. I think some of the songs would be familiar to Tanner and his family. They're going to perform them live in Między Słowami on Thursday at 2 p.m. So please save the date, check our socials for any further information. And once again, thank you very much for taking the courage and the effort to come to Lublin again. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you around soon.